Brothers, it's time for another horror movie session. Today we bring you the horror film Grave Encounters. Deep in the desolate mountains of America, there stands an abandoned mental asylum. Covering 80,000 square meters, it once housed hundreds of thousands of psychiatric patients. Sometimes the doctors were overwhelmed and had to refuse admissions. Now it lies completely deserted and dilapidated. The reason is that after a surgeon who graduated from Harvard took over as the hospital director, he began conducting inhumane brain research on the patients. During his 11-year tenure, he removed the frontal lobes from over 200 patients. This frontal lobe is located directly above the forehead and is responsible for regulating emotions, language expression, and motor control. And this director, Dr. Friedkin, happened to be a neurology specialist with an extremely abnormal obsession with brains, so he abused his position to perform unethical experiments and lobotomies on the patients. Finally, on August 15, 1948, it all came to an end. 6 patients escaped their confinement, and while Dr. Friedkin was taking an afternoon nap in his office, they stabbed him to death with a dagger. After that, strange occurrences became constant in the hospital, and patients seeking treatment gradually avoided it. In 1974, the government attempted to renovate and repurpose the hospital, but during construction, paranormal events kept happening. One worker was even suddenly attacked by an unseen force, pushed down the stairs, and broke his leg. The security guard, Kenny, who watches the place, also revealed that supernatural events occur in many parts of the building. For example, this door on the roof. Kenny always double-checks it's locked before leaving work, but by the next day, it's always mysteriously open again. And this bathtub here, every nightfall dripping water sounds can be heard coming from it. It's said a woman once slit her wrists and died in it while bathing. Finally, there's the underground tunnel on the basement level. Stretching 2 kilometers long, it connects to all the buildings on the grounds, but Kenny always feels a piercing chill inside whenever he goes down there. He also says he constantly feels many pairs of eyes watching him. So whenever Kenny goes to inspect it, he only dares to peek from the tunnel entrance, never venturing deep inside. After interviewing these key individuals, Lance and his paranormal investigation TV crew decided to enter the building tonight at 10 p.m. and stay until 6 a.m. tomorrow to see if they could capture any paranormal events. To record more details, Lance assigned Matt to install cameras in rooms where paranormal events had occurred. Matt would later monitor the building's activity from the main screen. If he spotted anything wrong, he would immediately radio the other 4. Next, Lance led his team inside the building. But the deeper they went, the more humid the environment became, and the stench of various kinds of decay filled the air. Because the hospital had installed iron bars and boarded up every window to prevent patient escapes, over the years, almost no sunlight ever reached the interior. Crew member Sasha couldn't help but remark how cold it was. Then they began calling out the names of ghosts and even lay down in the bathtub where someone had supposedly committed suicide, but the spirits never showed themselves. Lance also brought out his personal Polaroid camera. According to him, this camera can capture things invisible to the naked eye, and ghosts are often sneaky, liking to appear behind people. If something really appeared behind them in a photo, they would only know after the picture developed. But Lance took several photos in a row and found nothing unusual. Then the group arrived at that underground tunnel. Because while taking pictures earlier, Houston said he heard noises coming from below. However, when they followed the sounds, all they found was a group of chattering rats. Oh! After that, Lance and the others had no choice but to return to their base camp for a short rest. By now, less than 4 hours remained before filming ended. Not wanting the show to be a bust, Lance planned for the 4 of them to split up and film separately later. He said this would increase their chances of capturing paranormal footage. Meanwhile, back at the base camp, among the places where they had installed cameras, the door Kenny had mentioned earlier suddenly and quietly opened. Over here, Lance and his group had reached the upper floors. After briefing them on some filming details, they split up to begin their separate tasks. Perhaps because ghosts fear crowds, not long after crew member TC separated from the group, he stumbled into a shower room. One moment he was complaining about how cold it was tonight. The next, the door behind him suddenly slammed shut by itself. TC was startled. After confirming no one was around, he urgently radioed Lance and the others. Lance was initially skeptical, suggesting it might have been the wind. TC argued that even if wind blew in, it couldn't possibly move a door that heavy. After reviewing TC's footage, they finally believed him and grew excited. After explaining to the audience via the camera, Lance instructs Houston to begin a seance at the door, encouraging the ghosts to display their supernatural powers once more to enhance the content of their show. Just then, a loud crash came from a room not far away. Lance hurriedly calls the team to leave the shower room and head into the hallway, cautiously approaching the room from which the noise originated. When they arrived, they discovered it was a gurney with casters that had been pushed over, its wheels still spinning fast. It seems that person possessed quite a bit of strength. Houston radioed Matt at the screen, but Matt reported no one else was in the building and everything was normal. Sasha speculated they had definitely encountered paranormal activity. Striking while the iron was hot, she quickly pulled out a recorder called an EVP device. This machine can not only record human speech but also capture sounds inaudible to the human ear. After recording, Sasha started playing the audio on a loop. Then the recorder emitted a beeping sound, like a telegraph machine operating. While everyone listened intently, Sasha's hair inexplicably floated up into the air. Clearly, an invisible presence had tugged it from behind. After this incident, Sasha seemed distraught. She retreated into the stairwell and argued with Lance, demanding to leave and go home. But at this critical juncture, Lance couldn't possibly abandon filming. He first sent Houston to take Sasha back to the base camp on the first floor to rest. Then he and the others returned to the previous location to continue the communication attempt, with TC filming opposite them. But Houston shouted like a madman for a long time with no response. It was now 4:40 a.m. Less than 2 hours before Kenny was due to open the doors. TC also urged Lance to call it a day, as he had an audition for another shoot later that afternoon and couldn't waste time working overtime here. Reluctantly, Lance snapped a few more photos and left. Then they started packing their personal belongings in the lobby, while Matt was sent upstairs to retrieve the cameras. Only he knew their exact locations. But TC among the group was clearly becoming agitated. It was now 6:15 a.m., and Kenny still hadn't arrived to open the doors, 15 minutes late. Amid TC's constant complaints, another hour passed. Now, not only was Kenny missing, but Matt, who went upstairs for the cameras, had also vanished. Assuming Matt must have encountered trouble, they had Houston wait for Kenny on the first floor while the others went upstairs to search for Matt. But as TC passed by a set of stairs, he was suddenly shoved hard by an unseen force. After this incident, TC could endure no more. Regardless of whether Kenny showed up, he was getting out. He then pushed a gurney out of a room, called Lance to help, and together they rammed it into the main doors, forcing them open. It was now almost 8 a.m., yet no sunlight streamed in from outside. TC stepped back in disbelief because what they saw wasn't the outside world, but the entrance hallway they had come through yesterday, pitch black. Houston also picked up the chain Kenny used to lock the door off the floor. Looking at the writing on the door, it was the same door, but the exit had changed. Lance and the others then opened door after door, finding the layouts identical to before. Even the angles at which doors hung were the same. Frustrated, TC charged at a window but found it immovable. He shouted out the window, but no one answered. Houston, who had studied paranormal events, explained that perhaps the building had some kind of time-warping magnetic field. Maybe they had only been inside for less than 3 hours. This explained why it was 8 a.m. on the timer, yet no sun was visible outside. After arguing, they decided to head upstairs. If there was a fire escape, they could use it to leave the building. They climbed flight after flight of stairs, full of hope. Seeing a sign pointing to the roof, TC yelled excitedly. But after turning the next corner, he was faced with a solid concrete wall. TC, filled with anger, strikes the wall a few times before ultimately descending the stairs in despair. Soon they faced another problem. They were lost. Looking at the corridor map, Lance felt like they had passed the same architecture many times over, and Sasha's compass was malfunctioning, unable to distinguish directions. Just then, a figure suddenly darted past behind them. Lance thought it was the long-missing Matt. He led the group in pursuit, but at the end they found a strange, unfamiliar woman standing with her back to them in a corner. Seeing this, they fled the room in panic and hid. However, in the chaos, Houston, who was running at the back, got separated from the group. He continuously shouted Lance's name in the hallway, but the only response he received was the creaking sound of the door slowly opening in front of him. Houston was unaware something had already emerged from the room. He kept shouting recklessly down the corridor. In an instant, he was hoisted into the air by something that gripped his throat. At this moment, Lance and the others had been trapped in the building for nearly 2 days. Overwhelmed with exhaustion, everyone had fallen asleep. Sasha awoke feeling a sharp pain in her back. Lance slowly lifted her shirt and discovered many English letters carved into Sasha's back. Not only that, but bracelets had been placed on their wrists. These were the tags only psychiatric patients wore. Now their names were written on the bracelets. Later they found the long-missing Matt in one of the rooms, but he seemed mentally unhinged and was now dressed in a patient's gown. Lance asked Matt what he had seen, but TC didn't want details. He just wanted to find an exit and get home to his wife. Matt replied that of course they could leave, but first everyone had to undergo a lobotomy in the hospital. Saying this, Matt began to laugh maniacally. Then he stood before a bathtub staring fixedly at the bloody water inside. Knowing someone had died in it, TC told Matt to stay away from the tub and tried to pull him back. As the bloody water surged out, TC, who was dragged in, vanished without a trace. But Matt stared at everything in the room and burst into loud laughter. Not long after, the others, still searching for an exit, finally found an elevator. Because they were stuck on this floor, Lance thought of climbing down the elevator shaft. Reaching the basement level and entering the underground tunnel might be their escape route. Saying this, Lance found a suitable metal pipe to pry open the elevator doors. But as he was about to leave the room, he spotted a severed tongue on the floor. The blood was fresh. It had been cut off recently. Lance was taken aback to find a dead psychiatric patient hanging above him. In a panic, he rushed to the elevator and banged on the door to escape. Fortunately, there was a ladder for climbing. Lance had Sasha go down first, then Matt, with himself last. Just as he finished speaking, the evil spirit let out a terrifying roar and lunged towards them. Lance also picked up his camera and moved forward because a door not far away could block the entity. Seeing Lance in danger, Sasha handed her camera to Matt and shouted as she rushed to help. With their combined effort, they successfully blocked the entity outside the door. But when the camera turned to Matt behind them, he began laughing eerily again. Then he leaped down the elevator shaft. When Lance and Sasha climbed down the ladder, they found Matt was already dead. Now only 2 remained from the original 5-person investigation crew. Lance comforted Sasha while forcing open another elevator door. He said the tunnel lay ahead, and if they could safely pass through, they could escape the haunted building. But staring into the pitch-black depths of the tunnel entrance, Lance had no idea what monsters they might encounter next. After walking nervously for a while, Lance realized they had arrived back at the tunnel entrance. They had been walking in circles. He flung the metal pipe away in fury, his hope completely gone. Then Sasha began coughing violently, vomiting large amounts of blood. She had developed a high fever earlier, and coupled with having eaten nothing for too long, her body couldn't hold on. Lance could only support Sasha as she leaned against the wall to rest. But soon, thick smoke silently began to pour from the tunnel entrance, quickly enveloping them. When the smoke cleared again, Lance found Sasha had vanished from beside him. He tried communicating with the entities using the special recorder, asking them what they wanted, but the only answer Lance received was eerie laughter. Lance was now broken, desperate, and driven mad by hunger. He began shouting profanities at the camera. After clubbing a rat in front of him to death, Lance desperately pounced on it, devouring it frantically. To get more protein, he even swallowed all its organs. He laughed maniacally while eating, as if he had already become a mental patient. Suddenly, he saw an iron door around the corner, filled with various clutter, all tools used for surgeries. A chalkboard displayed a diagram of a brain, and photos of patients whose brains had been removed hung beside it. This must have been Dr. Friedkin's former laboratory for performing surgeries. In the final scene, Lance faced the camera, his forehead covered in fresh blood. It appeared he had been forcibly subjected to a frontal lobotomy.